Hello and welcome to the 90 Minute Fever podcast with Steve and Nick. I am Steve, one of the admins in game, manager of Strictly Butterside Up in the Twilight FA, and Nick is the lead developer of 90 Minute Fever. This is the 21st podcast in the series, and if you're interested in the previous ones, they're all available on the Isochron YouTube channel. Right, let's get straight onto it. Today's podcast is focused on something that I've really been looking forward to, the upcoming manager skills feature. So we'll get straight into it. I'll give you a quick overview, and then we'll discuss it in a lot more detail. So, just to really hopefully most of you will have seen, most of you listening to this will have already seen the post, giving the sort of overview, the broad strokes of it. So I'm going to summarise that quickly. Users will earn manager skill points each month. They will use these points to purchase manager skills. And at the end of the season, all the manager skills are reset and users are able to remold their points allocation for the beginning of the next season. And obviously the amount of manager points you get is dependent on how you do. Manager skills will provide various advantages in the game. The skills chosen have a real effect on the different aspects of running your club. So from finances to youth development and all the way through to match day. And it's up to each user to pick and choose each season which skills will benefit their club the most. Or they can simply pick the skills to tailor their gameplay experience to increase their overall enjoyment of the game. I think the best place might actually be to start. The very first question that was asked, really, I think it was from Mike, and he asked, he just wanted a general idea of how many skills on average will each team get, so he can know for advanced planning. So I think it's as good a place to start as any. Over to you, Nick.
Yeah, sure. So I think the quick version of that is between about 20% of all of them and about, not sure many people will ever get there, but the theoretical maximum would be in the ballpark of around 60% of all of them. So a new user would have, enough points to get about 20% of them. And if you have the sort of best theoretical possible season, it'd be something in the ballpark of around 60%. So some users will literally have 3 times more skills than other users, and obviously the whole range in between all of that, because it's based on the reputation that you got in the previous season. So the minimum that anyone will get is about 20% of them, and then essentially depending on how well you do, you get up to an extra 40% or so of them. I mean, I say that, but it's obviously the skills have different prices, so I'm not saying of all of them. It's just to try to answer the question as simple as possible, but obviously not all skills are created equal. If you want to get as many skills as possible and you just buy all the cheapest ones, then obviously you'll have more total skills, and if you want the more expensive ones, you'll end up with less total skills. It's just a broad answer to the question. And the reputation system, there was a separate post about that, but that's also changed so that there's more.
I guess it's more extreme season to season, isn't it?
It's less flat. Less flat, more extreme, sort of less flat. There's much bigger difference now between having a good season and having a bad season in regards to the reputation that you'd earn for that season, because the reputation system itself has changed. So now it's just the average of your best cup performance and your league performance, whereas before it was a bit more complicated than that, and it made it less punishing, I guess is a word, if you happen to have a bad league performance or your best cup performance was bad. The way the formula worked, it weighted the better of those two more, so it made it the worse of those two less sort of punishing for you. But now that's not the case. So if you happen to not put together a single cup run of any description, then your reputation for the season is going to take a much bigger hit than it previously did, because of that, but also because of the cup reputations themselves have changed. We've scrapped from the games the concept that there is a minimum reputation that can be earned in each cup. If you get knocked out in the first round, you get nothing, basically, for that cup. So if you get knocked out in the first round and finish bottom in the group in every cup that you're in, then come the end of the season, you will earn a big fat 0 for your cup performance, and that will count for half of your reputation for the season. So you literally just take your league reputation and halve it. That'll be what you get. Yeah, it's much more cutthroat
And I
And
suppose on the other side of things, if it goes really well, you win your league, win the SP Cup,
oh
you're
yeah,
going to
well on the
do
other
pretty
end
well
of
out of it.
that, the top end of the reputations have increased significantly as well. So you get a lot more for winning stuff, and you get a lot less for losing. That's just in terms of the reputation, which impacts your overall reputation, which impacts your revenue stream. But then also for the season specifically, it's going to impact your skills, and your skills. I mean, the skills are pretty good. They're pretty impactful, and having access to less skills is going to, it's going to hit pretty hard. And having access to more skills is going to help as well. So if you have a good season, it's just much more, immediate and obvious. The rewards are, they're apparent. It's probably the better word. They're just immediate and apparent. Like, you did well, you get a bunch of skills, and these skills are going to help you now. You get them now, they help you now, and then also you're going to increase your club reputation as before. But that's more of it's going to help you a little bit every single day for the next 5 seasons. It's somewhat less apparent that, like, it's just it helps obviously, but it's just not the same when you don't get your food on your plate today. Being told you're going to get a little bit more food every day for the next 5 years is just not quite as exciting as getting a great big roast dinner today or something like that. I don't know what the idiom is, but I think just having a great season and ending up with a lot more skills than before, and that's as you progress through the game, through the divisions, you will get more and more points as you get to the higher divisions. If you have a good cup run, then you'll get more points, but if you don't, you get less. You will plateau, and some seasons will be better than others, and some seasons you have more skills than others. It will make it very important to have to do your best to deliver the goods, and failing has consequences now. Whereas I think before, failure didn't really matter that much. Really, like, obviously it was better to be successful than to fail, but it's nothing like real life, where clubs just completely implode if they get relegated. I mean, it's not going to be that bad. It's not going to be anywhere near as punishing as what it is in real life for failure, but still, I think it's going to it's very, it's changing the balance. I think it's just, in order to make winning more rewarding, it has to be the case that failure is less rewarding. If failure is equally as good as success in regards to reward, then it doesn't feel very good to be successful at all. There's no difference, right? And the more extreme the difference,
Absolutely.
the more important it's going to be successful. And it's just changing that balance. It's more important now to do well. You can still have a bad season, and it's not like your club's going to cease to exist, or you're going to get kicked out of the game, or anything like that. It's, you're just going to have a bit of a rougher ride the next season, and you just turn it around or whatever. But
some decisions.
Yeah, I think. I mean, particularly obviously if you get relegated as well, then the level of competition is lower as well, and the teams in the tier down, even though yes you will have less skills, you'll also be competing against other teams that broadly have much less skills on average than what you competed against the previous season. So yes, even though some users will have literally 3 times as many skills as other users in the game, those users aren't actually, they're not competing against one another. On the one end you're in Division 1, on the other end they're in the bottom division, and you're scaling in between. I mean, obviously there will be range within divisions, but by and large, the teams that you are actually directly competing against, you're going to have a similar, in the ballpark, similar amount of skills.
And so having a good season and suddenly having more skill points to spend on the next season really can make a difference, and that's the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it can, and it will. And it will feel nice to, you just things that you didn't in the previous season wasn't even an option for you to consider. All of a sudden you've got all of these extra options open up for you. I think it will feel really rewarding to have, and also, when you fail and you have your choices restricted, it's hard, but it's still interesting from a decisions perspective. The decisions are very important still. It's just as important to decide what to cut as what it is to decide what to add.
Yeah, indeed. Know that from the academies. So, I suppose one of the things I particularly like about this is obviously because we're not giving people too many of the skills. It's going to mean there's a lot of different ways to approach the game, isn't it? I think if you give people too many skills and they end up with, I don't know, almost all of them, if you were doing it as an accumulative thing over time, it just everyone eventually ends up with the same skills, don't they? But this way, because you're resetting it every month, it really gives different way of people to approach the game. Some people who concentrate on youth setup, and there's great skills from that side of things. There's some great skills from all the wheeler dealer types. I think it's just going to make every season. It's been a little bit like a mini game every season, I think.
Yeah, and importantly, the prices will change. It's going to significantly change the makeup of what's possible and what's the best value and what makes sense for you on a season-to-season basis. Because not only will the amount of points that each person has, that will change season to season, but also the prices of the skills will change also, and they will change a lot potentially as well. But by design, the changes won't be insignificant. Let's say they're going to be, imagine, significant enough to make a difference, and then add a 0 on the end of that, something like that. They're going to be quite swingy, let's say. So, but by design, if you are flexible, let's say, and you are just trying to get the best value out of the system, then the skills that you have each season are going to be completely different. I mean, not literally every single skill will be different to what you had last season each time, but the overall makeup of your skills, the skills composition that you have, is going to look completely different on a season-to-season basis, even if the amount of skill points that you have is very similar on a season-to-season basis.
Yeah, I can definitely see. I can see people really looking and analysing this, going, and really, I can see some people getting really into this and really looking in and go, oh right, okay, if I pick that skill, that could mean about 3.5 million to me here, but it's, but they've got to sacrifice something else which might have got them some. So it's going to be a really real balance. I think it's going to be quite interesting to see the kind of decisions people will have to make here.
Oh, I think there'll be people definitely with their pen and paper out, their calculator, their spreadsheets. I think trying to quantify every option, and I don't know. I think it will be very cutthroat, honestly, very difficult. It's intentional though. You want the decisions to be important, to be meaningful.
Of course,
they will be, and because they will be so important. I mean, the good news is that even if you totally mess it up, at least the slate's wiped clean at the end of the season, at least. So you can fix it all. You can get it right the second time round. But
exactly, and it also makes for a completely, you can completely change your approach to the game, can't you? Maybe you're bringing a youth team through and you want all the youth skills. Once you've got that youth team through, you're actually not really concentrating on the youth anymore. Maybe you're going towards the coaching because you want the senior coaching, because they're now seeing this group of wonder players you've got together is getting older, and you just want to make sure they've got the best coaching possible, or maybe you're concentrating on something else. I think it's definitely an interesting setup and allows a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, and it could force your decisions to some degree. I mean, the way, because it's not just the skills, right? It's your whole approach to the game. Like, you might have been umming and ahhing about whether you wanted to do a rebuild or not, but then the way that the skills fall, you're like, well, I can get a bunch of these academy skills. They're not too expensive this season. I think I'm just going to go all in here. Going to get the 10 million academy. I'm going to get the extra graduate slots. I'm gonna hit the big red button and go nuclear and do the big rebuild this season. Yeah. It could, or the opposite could happen, right? You just say, well, it doesn't make sense to do it this season because all those skills are really expensive. Going to get half the value out of running the academy compared to what I might if I waited till next season. Because the thing is as well, when the skills are overpriced, then far less people will buy them, and then their price will drop the next season. So if a skill is really obviously ends up overpriced, it's going to obviously be hard for the very first season until people have it. There's at least a little bit of how do you say, like a little bit of experience maybe with the system. But I think a few months in, I think you'll find that there'll be predictions, let's say, predictions about what the prices will be next season, and like it's not just the skills, but the skills to some degree, not a huge degree, but to some degree, can actually dictate your whole entire approach to the season and to future seasons to some degree. If a rebuild is involved, obviously it's not just this season, right? It's going to impact your gameplay experience for many seasons to come, the decision to do that or not to do that.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the actual skills themselves shortly, but before we do that, should we talk about quickly why were these particular skills chosen, Nick?
Sure. I mean, I think it was covered a little bit on the post, wasn't it? But I guess we could just elaborate on that. Probably one of the biggest reasons is they were chosen because they were asked for in various guises, of course. So some of them were just asked for directly, either as a skill, or just asked for directly, but not necessarily intending that they would end up a skill. So we've have had users, for example, ask or suggest that there should be more graduate slots for the academy trials. So they didn't necessarily ask for it to be a skill, but they wanted the number to be higher. We've had other types of feedback, like a lot, people not being happy with when they get a red card early in the match, or don't like getting knocks early in the match. So they didn't necessarily ask for them to be a skill, but they've voiced their displeasure at how those things work. So it's, there's changes. Essentially, you don't have to have the same set of rules for every user anymore. So if some users would prefer for the game to work differently, you don't have to choose to make it work differently to make one set of users happy, but then another set of users will be unhappy because they liked how it used to be. So you can essentially create different rules to some degree, not entirely, but there's within some parameters you can create a different rule set for each user to allow more people to enjoy the game, or more people to have the game sort of fit how they feel it should work, yet keep everything balanced, because in order to have it work how you want to work and to have some extra benefits, or for it to be less restricting, or whatever the case may be, the downside of that is that you have to spend some of the skill points and you get access to less other skills. So that's probably one of the main reason. I think the other ones are, well, obviously adding extra gameplay, extra decisions. As with the academy trials, we don't really want to add systems to the game that don't add any gameplay, don't add any interesting decisions. So we wanted this manager skills implementation to add gameplay, to add interesting decisions, to be rewarding, to create different ways to approach and to play the game. So that was very important. And then aside from that, we just wanted it to generally, for the skills as a collective set, to make sense, for there to be a balance across the board, there be variations in things, for there to be synergies between skills, to have sort of like combos, so to speak. And
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think there's other considerations, but they were more from design considerations. I don't know how. I don't think those ones are as interesting, maybe.
Yeah, I guess one thing to point out that users might not be aware of, that I think is quite an important one, is because the skills are reset each season, it does give a lot of flexibility in design with regards to future decisions. Adding more skills, removing skills, splitting skills up, because it's all reset. It, effectively, it allows, you don't have to break the game to change anything, do you?
No. Yeah. Yes. No, we don't. Yes, we don't. Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a huge deal for us, because it's a persistent, perpetual online game. If you ever change how anything works, you're going to end up with a lot of unhappy people, no matter what it is, typically speaking. Whereas with the skills, because it resets every season, it, unlike basically everything else in the entire game, I mean, obviously some things reset every season, like the competition structures reset. So technically speaking, we could change the tiebreaker rule in the league from one season to the next, and it's not gonna be very dramatic. But by and large, if we change systems in the game, because the game doesn't ever reset, it's a state that's continuous. It's very difficult to change anything. So there's consequences, there's repercussions for us to ever change anything. Whereas with the manager skills, it gives us a huge amount of design space to operate within. If you think about it, there's a lot more skills that could be added, and everyone would have different ideas, and you add up all of those ideas together, and the number that you would end up with is probably more than 1,000 pretty easily. Like the future scope for this, not saying we would end up with over 1,000, by the way. I'm just saying there's that many sort of possible ideas easily that could exist. They wouldn't all necessarily make sense to do, and maybe not make sense to do together. But the scope for this is just huge, potentially, in the future, and parts of the game could really be expanded with this as well. There's a lot of potential, I guess, for this to do a lot, and you don't want to be have your hands tied and to be sort of bound by the legacy of the initial implementation. Because it resets, it doesn't matter that we have 21 skills now. If we want 25 next season, or the season after, whatever the case, it doesn't matter. We can just add some more. It's if for example, it was persistent, then people could get upset because they were like, well, if I knew you were going to add that skill, then I wouldn't have picked this one. Or wouldn't have done this. I would have got this skill instead if I had known you were going to do that in the future. And, this type of thing. And they'd be legitimate. Because it could be true, right? They'd probably be true. So it's not like people would just be complaining. They'd have legitimate grievances. Mm-hmm. And you would, and that's just if you want to add them, let alone if you want to remove skills that they've already got, or you want to say, well, we're going to change this skill because it's too good. We need to balance it, so we're going to make it worse. Everybody who has that skill could then say, well, I wouldn't have picked this skill if I had known you were going to make it worse in the future. So, we can split skills out, we can merge skills together, we can make them better, we can make them worse, we can remove them, we can add skills. We can do anything we want just about on a season. We can just focus on doing what's best for the game going forwards all the time. We don't have this legacy with hanging over us like we do with a lot of other things. It's like, well, you can't just change something to make the game better in the future because you're going to upset a lot of people in the present, and that's a big problem for us all the time. It's quite, the design space is naturally restricted in a persistent game, because changing things has consequences. So it was very important. I know you probably don't need to go on about that anymore. I'm just saying from a design perspective, this is very, very, very good for us to have something that we can just focus on making it the best possible thing that it can be every season. That's the focus, and we don't have to make it. We don't have to compromise it because of decisions made in the past ever. We can always just focus on if we have ways to make it better, we can always just do it. We don't have that legacy.
Yep. Great. Okay, well, now that we've been talking about that kind of thing, let's talk about the actual skills, shall we? I know there's going to be a lot of people interested in these. Maybe we'll discuss our thoughts on some of these as we go through them. Don't want to spend too long on each individual one because otherwise this podcast is going to get far too long. But we'll go through some of them now, and we'll see how we get on. So let's get straight into it. We'll do them in order that they're posted. We'll start with the academy category, and we're actually going to start with the one that hasn't really been suggested in any way, shape or form. Actually, this is just one that's been made up. That's the Foresight one, Nick.
Yeah, it'll show you on the academy players on the profile where it shows the attributes and it shows the values for the ones that have been revealed. Where the number goes for the attribute score, it would show it shows a letter like A, B, C, and so on and so forth for the next one. So the one with the letter A showing for where the attribute score is, that would be the next attribute that's going to be revealed if you click reveal. So you don't know what number it's going to be, obviously, but you know that is the attribute that will be revealed next. And you know, the next 3, the next 6, or the next 9. So if you knew the next 3, you'd have A, B, and C showing. And then when you revealed the attribute, A would show, and then what was B would become A, and what was C would become B, and then something else would be C. Yeah, I mean, I think with this one, it'd be very, it's quite interesting because it's, I think, like every single skill, I don't want to repeat this too much, but the value in it has a huge correlation to the price that it has. So for the right price, as will be true for every skill, it's a good skill to have for the right price, especially if you are the type of person who's who's willing to cut trialists without knowing everything about them, something like that. Because if you've got a trialist and you're not sure if they're going to make the grade or not, and you need to know something important attribute to make the decision for their position. If they're a striker, you need to know what finishing they've got or whatever the case may be. And you know the next 9 attributes coming, and you know that none of them is going to tell you, it's not going to tell you their pace, it's not going to tell you their finishing, it's not going to tell you they're off the ball, it's not going to tell you their composure. And none of the 9 next reveals are going to tell you that. You probably can just cut the player because the amount of investment that's required in order to end up being able to answer the question is just too high to make sense. So
I think this is an interesting one because when I first looked at this attribute, this skill, I was thinking, well, what difference does it make if I know what's coming next? And then the more you think about it, the more you actually realise how useful it could be. If you're going to know that determination is the next one out, you can quickly pop that out and get rid of them, or something like that. If that's something that really matters to you, and as you were just describing, I think it's quite an interesting one. That one, I'll be curious how many people see value in that and how many people just sort of completely ignore it. But don't want to spend too much time on all of them, so we'll move on to the next one. Expansion, which is increasing the total number of Academy Trial graduate slots. Don't think we need to go into any real detail on that. Is what it says on the tin, really, isn't it?
Yep, I think so. And that's probably about half of the skills, so we can just move on.
I suppose one thing, this is the first one that this applies to, that sometimes the base level is lower, and quite a lot of these skills, the base level we're going to put in the game is lower than what it is now to ensure the balance of 90-minute Fever in general. You need some of them be far too powerful if the level 3 was crazy, I should think. So, for example, I'm just using this as an example, that the base is going to be 5 slots going forward rather than 6. So if you want the status quo, you need to get level 1 to get 6 slots effectively. So just to point that out, that's the same case for a few of the other ones as well. Okay, third one, on the final one in the Academy section, is scouting. So the paid attribute reveals are discounted by X%.
Yeah. So, that's just what it says on the tin. So whenever you pay to reveal an attribute, it would be discounted by 10, 20, or 30%, depending on the level, if you have it. That's
could be really valuable if you're.
Could be. I mean, there's plenty of people who spend over 10 million a season, some closer to 20, some more even, on paid attribute reveals.
Yeah, so it could definitely really help anyone who's a bit trigger happy
20
on
to
those.
30 million. I mean, 30% of 30 million is 9 million savings.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who don't spend those types of amounts of money, but there are some people who do, and for those people, it's very, very valuable. And there's a lot of people who spend millions though on them. Mm-hmm. So I think this is one of those. So
this could be a calculation.
Like probably all the academy skills, quite frankly, but they all obviously have increased value the more you're spending on the academy trial as well.
Absolutely. And the more trigger happy you are, the more impatient you are with finding out how a player is, the more likely this skill is going to be for you. I see fully revealed players after about 3 days sometimes. So you definitely know some people really get into it early. So this could be a huge skill for them. Okay, right, onto the next category, which is physio. Now, this particular one I think is going to be huge. I'm just going to predict that this one's going to be hugely popular because we get a lot of let's say feedback regarding injuries. So this one really helps you get more control over it. So prevention, Nick.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about this one a lot. So it's ended up in this, guys. We decided that this would be better than making it, say, have your players have 10% or 20% or 30% less chance to get a knock, because if it was 30% less chance, then players would still get knocks, obviously, and people would still be unhappy, and they'd just get angry that they've got the skill that makes it 30% less, but they still get them sometimes. And we just figured that this way would just help people to. It's just transparent, I guess, is a way. Like if it's 30% less chance, you can't really see that it was less easily. You can't really see that it necessarily was helping you. You just see that your player still got a knock and that it didn't help you. This way, it's just transparent. You just, at level 3, your players will just never get a knock in the first half of the match, full stop. Now, it's probably worth pointing out that this doesn't mean that you'll get half the amount of knocks, because the way that they work, they have much more chance of happening the further into the game it is. I think, as at the moment, for example, more than 2/3 of the knocks are in the second half of matches. So, at level 3, you would still have knocks. You're still going to have probably a bit more than 2/3 the amount of. So you'd have about a 33% less knocks or something. But importantly, none of them would ever be in the first half of a match. And obviously, it's not just the total number of knocks here that matters. The more early they happen in the match, the more punishing they are as well. So yes, you would have less, but you would avoid the early ones, which are more punishing. So it's quite hard to say what that is as a. You're probably half as impact at level 3. You're probably the impacts of knocks are probably, yes, you end up with a bit more than 2/3 of them, but you never have them in the first half where they're the most punishing. I don't know what that looks like, but it's probably something like in the ballpark of you're half as impacted by them, something like that.
Okay. All right, that's enough on that one, I think. We're going to move on to the next one, which is recovery, which is where players regain a certain amount of condition after each match.
Yep, so at the moment they get back 40% of the condition that's missing, or 5% condition, whichever's greater. So the base for that will be changed to 4 and 40, but then the skill will increase that up to 5 and 56 and 60 and 7 and 70. So to be clear, 7 and 70 is a lot, pretty much. It pretty much means that a player, when they get the knock, they will, maybe they miss the next match, but that's it, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got sort of an average kind of player who's down to, I don't know, 80. Well, let's just say he's down to 80%. If you've got no skill in this category, you're getting 40% of that back, aren't you? Which is probably, would he be up to about 88, something like that?
Yeah, 88 exactly.
Whereas you get 70% of that back after one match. He's already into the 90s, isn't he? I don't know, is that 93, 94? Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's a huge difference between that. You're really only missing him for one match, and he's just about ready to go, isn't he, in the second match? So it's quite.
I mean, at that level, it's 80, 94, 100. That's the recovery path. Really, I mean, basically after 2 matches, all your players are back to 100, and after 1 match, you can play them. Pretty much. I mean, I don't know if that's literally true, but it's in the ballpark of being true. I don't know exactly off the top of my head if that's literally true. Sorry, but yeah, it'd be very close to being true. If you if you don't have a lot of squad depth, then that's very good. A skill, obviously.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, final one in this category: conditioning.
Unlike the first 2 here that are completely transparent, this one you have to just trust us that it's doing something and just look at the general, the general numbers, something like that, that your players they get back condition at half time, there is an attribute that helps with that, which is natural fitness. But that aside, they get their condition back. So this skill will just mean that however much they would have gotten back, they get more condition back, an extra 1%, 2%, or 3% depending on the level. The numbers don't sound as big as the other physio skills because obviously the number's smaller, but I don't think the impact of this is necessarily less.
If you think about the fact it's across your whole team, it's quite a lot, isn't it?
3% condition for every player at half-time every match. It's a big deal. Again, it helps. Yep. It's going to, depending on, it's going to change from squad to squad how much this one helps, but it's a big deal, pretty much. It's a big, every skill's pretty big, but yeah, the 3 physio ones in particular, I think all 3 will be popular, but it doesn't, the pricing system is done in such a way that they don't have to, all the skills don't have to be created equal. Some can be much better than others, and it's fine.
Okay, right. Let's move on to the next category then. We're on to the coaching. Right, these ones are pretty much all much of a muchness, the senior and the youth coaching. So quickly, for each category, this is a replacement for staff. For those, I think most people listening to the podcast will remember how the previous implementation was staff. So how's this one changed, Nick?
It's just what it says on the tin, really, at least for existing users, because they will have... at the moment we've got the description in to say the equivalent of a coaching staff just for existing users to have a frame of reference to understand the difference, if that makes sense. Because the difference between 5 out of 20 and 10 and 15 and 20 out of 20 in coaching, it doesn't mean that the player's attributes increase 4 times faster at 20 out of 20 than 5 out of 20, because there's other factors that impact the development of the players as well. It's just one of the factors, right? So we just did it that way for people who had experience with the existing system will understand the difference. Going forwards, we probably will change the description. But yeah, so at the moment the base is 10 out of 20 in every attribute, but that will be changed to 5. But now the skills take that up to 10, 15, and 20.
While we're on this subject, we can quickly answer one of the other early questions in the thread, which is I think Slackturn was asking about goalkeeper technical attributes. So they would just come under technical as well, I assume.
Yes. For now.
So hopefully that answers that question.
Like I was saying before, there's definitely scope for more skills, and we could definitely split out in the future potentially for there to be more skills here to work differently. Okay. It's just the initial implementation. Like we said before, one of the main benefits for this is that we could literally just click the delete button on all of these coaching skills and just do them all completely different in the future if we wanted. So
yep, great. Okay, right, let's move on to the next one. We're on to finance. This should be fairly straightforward. Investment.
Yep, so the shareholder dividend threshold, so at the moment that's tied to the progression level, the bronze, silver, gold. I think for bronze it's 10, for silver it's 25, and for gold it's 50 million. So that will no longer be tied, and instead it will just be depending on whatever skill you've got here, skill level you've got for investment. Obviously there's still sort of some correlation because the level, obviously the gold level users will typically have way more skill points than the bronze ones, so they'll have more skill points to be able to spend on this skill if they want it. And also the level 3 will take it up to 100 million, which is the highest it is for anyone at the moment is 50, so it's double that. So yeah, can be increased a lot beyond what it currently is.
Okay. Right, next one is negotiation, which reduces the signing fee on player purchases.
Yep. So it's just what it says on the tin. This one, I think the main thing just to say is that it's rebalanced. The base is now more. It was 10. The base is now 20, but it can be reduced down to 5% with the skill.
So this is an interesting one. I think you can see this depends on how you play the game, doesn't it? For wheeler dealer types, people who buy and sell a lot, this could be a hugely important fee, particularly if you buy players for large money. Having 5% rather than 20% on each purchase could be a massive difference. But on the other hand, if you're the type who just brings most of their players through the academy and maybe doesn't sign that many players at all, might not be valuable to you at all. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what people pick up. Anyway, moving on to the next one. The final one in the finance section is revenue, which is increasing the daily TV rights.
Yep.
Straightforward one, Nick, I'm guessing.
Yep, that's what it says on the tin. So increase it 30, like a third, 2/3, and a whole. That's at the moment it's 3 million. So basically, it's the daily rights. But if you're looking over the course of the whole season, if you got this on at the start of the season, then rather than 3 million TV rights, you get 4, 5, or 6 million. So at the highest level, it's literally just 3 million in your back pocket.
Definitely. So nice and simple. Everyone use that in their calculations. Okay, right. Next one. We're on to the squad section. Now, this next one probably does warrant a bit of explanation, and that is facilities.
I mean, this is one of the good things about being able to have the manager skills is that some people want to have lots of players, but the problem is that it was too advantageous to have lots versus people who have much less. But now that doesn't matter because we have manager skills, and you can have that advantage, and whatever that's worth, the skills will be priced to however much people feel it's worth. Yeah, so the base is reduced from 70 plus 7 to 50 plus 5, but now it can be increased up to 80 plus 8. How it works is it does two things. So one, during the season, you can't buy a player if you already have at least that many of the corresponding players. So if you the base limit will become, well, let's just talk about the current limit, I guess, which is 70 plus 7. So if you have 70 outfield players or more, then you can't sign an outfield player. And if you have 7 goalkeepers or more, then you can't sign a goalkeeper. If you have more than 70 outfield players at the end of the season, then some of them will automatically be sold. It explains which ones are sold according to whatever the rule is. This in the game guide, but some will be sold. And if you have more than 7 goalkeepers, some will be sold. Now, it doesn't include players who are going to retire, so it's 70 players ignoring those who are going to retire. And it doesn't include academy graduates in the amount either. Is that enough of an explanation?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just people were a little bit confused. People are asking, what happens at the start of next season?
Okay.
Start
so
of
with the
season, if I want to have that skill.
Yeah. Okay. So with the skills, because the skill will mean that the amounts can change. So when you have whatever the amount is that you have applies to the season and applies to the end of that season. So if you have level 3, you can have 80 plus 8. It means that you can buy players as long as you don't have more than that many during the season. And then at the end of the season, you won't have any players sold unless you're over that limit. But then the next season, let's just say for argument's sakes that you did have level 3 and you went all the way up. So you had 80 outfield players and 8 goalkeepers. So then the next season, your skills will be reset and your limit will be the base now, which will be 50 plus 5. So you'll have 30 too many outfield players and 3 too many goalkeepers. So you wouldn't be able to sign any players at that point unless you sold a lot of players first. Or you got the skill again. Yeah? And then at the end of that season, let's say you didn't get the skill in the most extreme example. So you had 80 plus 8, but then the next season you don't get the skill at all and you filled up all your slots. So then at the end of that next season, assuming you had no players that were going to retire, you would have 30 outfield players sold and 3 goalkeepers.
So
at the most extreme
in other words,
possible
I guess.
example.
Yeah. In other words, I guess with this, it's more of a long-term planning thing. This facility skill, isn't it? If you know you're going to be not going to be picking this late the next season, or are less likely to pick it, then you might want to start selling some players towards the end of the previous season. So it's a bit of planning, I think, in this one. Right, on to the next one. Squad loyalty.
Yeah, so it's a couple things with this. So one part of this is you'll see on each player's profile how long they've been at your club for, how many days. And for any players that have been at your club for at least 90 days, their wages will be discounted by a percentage if you have this skill. And it's up to 15%. So for a user who has all of their players at their club for more than 90 days and has a very high wage bill, it could be significant.
Yes, yeah, it certainly could. I think this is definitely another one which completely opposite of the wheeler dealer types. You're a kind of player who gets a lot of your players through your academy and does it that way. You're gonna want this skill, I think, and it's gonna, particularly if you've got a lot of, you keep a fairly large squad. You do under 18 and under 21 teams, which a lot of the academy people do. Then this is going to be quite a big skill for them, I suspect. Could save you a huge amount on your wage bill. So yeah, that's quite a good one, I think. Finally, on the squad category is learning, which increases the rate in which players learn new positions.
Yeah. So with this, it does what it says on the tin. It makes players it's the existing system where they learn positions, but they will just learn them at double, triple, or quadruple the speed at which they do at the moment.
I suppose that leads us straight on to the next one, doesn't it? A lot of these skills work quite well together, but this particularly feels like the case with this one, the match skill, which is versatility.
Yeah, so this reduces, again, it does what it says on the tin. I think with this one, though, it's worth pointing out that we're going to be removing the existing reductions here for youth levels and stuff like that we previously added. So there will be no other reductions to this. They will all be scrapped, and it will just be this. So the moment a player gets a disadvantage of playing out of position, that's in the game guide what that is, that amount will be reduced by up to 90%. Now, 90% reduction, that is borderline, doesn't make a difference, pretty much. So, yeah. I mean, it obviously does make a difference because it's still 10% of the difference. But in the case where the player already had some proficiency in that position, and the reduction wasn't that big to begin with, and then you're removing 90% of that reduction, it is kind of. It technically makes a difference, but probably not something that very noticeable or that impactful. So, yeah. I mean, at 90%, it really is the case that as long as the players have any proficiency at all, then they're kind of good to go, really, in those positions. Yeah. And then it also means they will learn those positions if they're playing in them as well. So it could be a nice combo for the season to get your players proficient in the positions you want them to be in, and then you won't need either skill the next season.
Yeah, indeed, and it particularly, this is going to be particularly of interest to people who like to spot players in the transfer market. I'm one of them myself, actually. I like to try and spot a player in the transfer market that maybe has some good skills in a position that's not particularly obvious, and you can sometimes pick them up a bit cheaper because of that. And then this would really allow you to convert them to where you want. These two skills combined would allow you to convert them, and while you're converting them, they would play pretty well as well, you would think, with only with the level 3 of the skills. So yeah, another interesting one, I think. On to the next one. We're nearly there now. We're on to support, which reduces the away disadvantage. Yep.
So it does what it says on the tin, pretty much. Don't know what else to say there. You get a disadvantage for playing away from home based on each player based on their teamwork. Whatever that disadvantage is for each player will be reduced by up to 75%. So obviously the lower the teamwork is for your team generally, the bigger your away disadvantage will be. So the bigger it is, the more the reduction will be as a total amount of 75% of a bigger amount is a bigger total reduction, obviously. It'd be more important for teams that have very bad teamwork for their players, but it would still be good for every team regardless.
Yeah, it's quite interesting again, this one, because you could maybe pick up a player. A lot of people don't like players who've got very low teamwork, but if you're planning on having level 3 in this skill, then maybe you pick up a player who's got low teamwork for a lot less than his actual his normal price. So you can combine a lot of these things with how you play the game, I think. Yeah, quite an interesting one. On to the very last one, which is the last one of the match category, which is discipline. Another interesting one, I think.
Yep. So players, it does what, yeah, like I said, it does what it says on the tin, but yeah, you just can't get a red card, a straight red card, or a red card unless they already have a yellow card in the first part of the match, first X minutes of the match, and that's at level 3 of the skill. It's up to the whole match. If you have level 3, it means none of your players can ever get a red card unless they've already got a yellow card in that match.
No more surprise straight reds. Yeah.
And a little bit
And I suppose...
Yeah, and obviously a
Sorry,
red card is more punishing the earlier it is in a match. Because the dynamic for a lot of these skills between, they do more at levels 1 to 2 to 3, but not all skills are sort of created equal in regards to their, the increased power levels from level to level. Like level 1 in this skill, for example, is pretty good. Because it's the red cards, the earlier they are in the match, the more they hurt, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that it covers you off for the... And level 2 is obviously pretty useful, but this is one of those ones you get the diminishing returns the higher you go up, right? Like level 2 probably does the job. For those who are really worried about this, level 2 kind of does the job realistically, and if you happen to get a red card in the last 30 minutes, you just take that one, if you know what I mean. You just wear it for the odd time, but it'll be interesting because the way that the points work for the skills as well is that each level for each skill is treated independently for the purposes of the points, how they're worked out. So it's possible, for example, if a level 1 in a skill is really, really popular, but nobody wants level 2 or 3, let's just say for argument's sakes, then that would be reflected in the pricing. So level 1 will be really expensive to get, but then to upgrade it to level 2 and then level 3 would be cheap after that.
Yeah, yep.
So this I think potentially could be one of those skills where level 1 is more expensive, but then it's not so expensive to get to level 2, and then it's probably pretty cheap to get to level 3 potentially. But who knows, honestly, because it's entirely user driven, so it matters what people actually do. It doesn't matter what I think.
I think this is a good example of a skill where 90-minute fever is a game. People say, "Oh, it's not realistic. You can't get a red card." This is a game. I think it's less of a simulation, more of a game. You want to enjoy you want to enjoy the game, and if this is really important to you, you don't get red cards. This enables you to enjoy the game more. Same with some of the other ones, like not getting injuries in the first half, things like that. So I think that's the good thing about the game. It doesn't have to be exactly like real life. I think you can change things to make the game more interesting, make the game more. I think one of the users said it's partly RPG like almost at certain parts of it. It's certainly very strategic, and these skills hugely strategic, I think.
Yeah, I'd also say that anyone saying that it doesn't have the benefit of being able to see all the feedback.
Yeah, indeed.
I can. People get very, very angry when they get a red card early in the match. Not everybody, but some people. Some people get very angry. So, if to some people it matters a lot. I don't know. Angry is probably the word. They get angry. They get upset, and for people who this really makes. And again, the early knocks, they just get really, really upset, really angry, and they can the game can be changed for them if they want it to be, and they can enjoy it more. So you don't want people to be angry, obviously, but at the end of the day, it's a competitive game, and it's a football game, right? So if you have no injuries and you have no red cards and you make it so that you can never concede a goal and nothing bad can ever happen, then it's not really a competitive game anymore, is it? So as long as you as long as you have that sort of competitiveness to the game, then people will get upset. So different people get upset about different things, and they're just some people who get really upset about the red cards and the knocks, and now they've got ways to mitigate that to. Well, in the case of the red cards, quite well, you would say, because one, they won't get any straight red ones, and they can sub their players off after they get a yellow if they want to make sure that it pretty much never happens to them. And in the case of the knocks, they can't mitigate it entirely, but between having all three of those, the two of the physio skills, between having the level 3 prevention and level 3 recovery, you're not going to be that impacted really, compared to other people that have neither.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because they're the thing. If they're the things that really bother you in the game, you spend your skills there. But it is at the expense of other stuff. So you've got a decision to make. Does it bother you enough? Does it make you angry enough that you want to not have your 3 million extra TV revenue you get for a level 3 on that, for example? So it's all a balance. So, but it's more in your control.
Angry, though. I mean, obviously people get angry about it, but it isn't just about that. Obviously, never having your players get a straight red card and never having your players get knocks in the first half and having all of your players recover basically after missing one match, it's also a pretty massive advantage. It's not just about being angry. It's also giving a very big advantage, and that's just offset by not having other advantages.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not offset, but balanced, right? It's just fair, And this, I say that, but I'm trying to make it sound like most people are. If you look at the feedback, yes, some people, we do get feedback that people aren't happy with these systems, but if you look at the overall, across everybody, I think it is the case that the majority of users are happy that squad management is actually a thing in the game now, that it's a better game for it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I think that's probably just made it all sound like everybody is. It's just some people are, but they're just very noisy about it. But I think if you look at across everybody, I think there are a lot of people who really do like that, having a bigger squad and having to rotate players and, having different combinations of players unavailable or different conditions, and it's like the puzzle is constantly evolving, and the solutions are different on a match to match basis. You can't just set your team and just click go, and that's it. I think there are quite a lot of people who really like the fact that going into each match, it's just there's slight differences or big differences, but it's just different. Every time you go into a match, it's different. You have to set things up slightly different, and I think a lot of people like that.
Absolutely. Okay, I mean, we talked a bit about we've gone through the skills now. We talked a bit about the how the skill prices will fluctuate. I assume this is effectively going to be the more popular ones are going to go up, the less popular ones are going to go down in skill points, and it allows the users to effectively the users are going to balance this over time, aren't they? So what a user feels is more important is going to go up in price, and it's going to change the whole balance. So I think that'd be quite interesting for particularly for users who are trying to maximise season on season, try and get squeeze every little penny out of the skills they've got, and and the advantages they can take from them. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, and I said at the start, but the fluctuations will be significant. We want there to be significant fluctuations, so it isn't the case that like every skill will just stabilize and sort of find its natural value and then will just never move after that. Like it isn't going to work that way. So how essentially the skills are going to be like ranked like absolutely how popular they are, and then their fluctuation will be based on their ranking, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the most popular skill will go up a lot in price, and the least popular one will go down. And it doesn't actually matter if the most popular one was only slightly more popular than the least popular one, or if it was way more popular than the least popular. How much more or less popular they are doesn't make any difference. All that matters is their overall ranking, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it is the case that there will be skills that go down a lot from one season to the next, and there will be skills that go up a lot from one season to the next, and there will be skills that stay around the same price from one season to the next. Every single season, that will be true. So we'll never sort of find there will never be this sort of final state or something like that. Like there will always be fluctuating.
Yeah, sure.
Like there will, at the start of each season, it will always be a different a different puzzle to solve in regards to working out the optimum set of skills.
Okay, and I suppose, I mean, I would think this is probably fairly obvious already, but just to confirm, the manager skills, you pick the manager skills at the very start of the season, don't you? Before you've done anything else, effectively.
Yeah,
this is your first job.
Yes, I think it's shaping up. Yeah, the absolute specifics could change at this point because I still need to test it and play it out. But we are looking at having like a pre-season at the start. Not sure how long it will last. I mean, it won't be that long, but there will be it's looking like either a day or 2 days at the start of the season. We're already talking about doing that anyway, having like a little period of time where you can't play official matches. So we thought, we'll flesh that out over time as an actual pre-season in the game. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that it's 48 hours or the first 2 days of the season. So the manager skills you would set up in those first 2 days or any day after that, but you could do that in the pre-season. I don't know. I mean, the match engine, us wanting to continue to do big updates to that going forwards, that's obviously a big deal here because you just need that little window at the start of each season if you're going to do a big update. If any update is kind of a big update in regards to the potential that it could have broken things or unbalanced things completely. So you just need that little window. So we just want to make the pre-season more of an actual sort of part of the game, and being able to do your manager skills will sort of be part of the things that you can do during those first couple of days. So it will be setting your skills up, playing friendly, setting your team up, setting your tactics up.
Okay, great. All this is coming at the start of May, guys. So I guess the thing to do is start earning those points to try and get as high a reputation as possible, and you get more points in the very first month, and more choice on your skills. Okay, well, I think that's about all we wanted to cover this time, Nick. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll post a link up to this on the forum. So if you've got anything you want to know about today's podcast, please do ask in the thread. We'll try and cover it. Good luck for the coming season, guys. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time.